Anthony Abagnano is the founder of Alchemy of Breath, a community and a training academy for breathwork facilitators from around the world. Anthony is also the founder of Asha, Alchemy School of Healing Arts, a retreat and community center located underneath a medieval village in southern Tuscany.
Hello, good people. How exciting it is to be part of this amazing summit, this gathering of illustrious new thought leaders and elders that are here to deliver a message, perhaps a message of hope in very troubled times. I feel so honored to be alongside such people as Deepak Chopra and Greg Braden and Krishna Das, and my goodness, so many of these wonderful people who've been my teachers, Marianne Williamson, throughout my life and have been guiding lights for me. And perhaps most of all, I'm grateful to you for being here, because without your presence, there'd be no place for these messages to land. There'd be no heart to be opened, no seed to be planted. So this is a really momentous occasion for us all to be sharing. And my part in this is to bring a message. The message I want to bring is about community and about how community starts with me and it starts with you. And I began my work in the public realms as the founder of Alchemy of Breath, and that's now become a movement of close to 1 million people who have used conscious breath work in a way to understand life in a different way, a way to inquire about life in a different way, and perhaps most of all to notice what's different, because it's by noticing what's different that we can actually create change. So instead of staying in our cyclical thought processes, we can break out of them and begin to consider things in a new way. And the bigger this has grown, the more humbled I've become to see how willing people are to look inside, not just outside to point the finger at the problems that exist in the world, but to look inside and to see what there is inside that needs fixing, that needs help, that needs love, so we can begin to have compassion for ourselves as human beings and love all of the conditions that we express, from the brightest and lightest and most joyful, but also down to those deeper, darker parts of ourselves that we might feel shame about too. And so really, in a sense, all of these breathers in my life have also been my teachers. They've helped me understand the importance of tending to my own inner garden. And when I mention the word community and the power that I'm witnessing in the gathering of community, I want to give just a few examples of how historical changes have been made as a result of people coming together. In fact, almost every major world shift has occurred because of people gathering together with like mind and like intention. Take, for example, back in 1989, when the Berlin Wall crumbled and a divided Germany was able to unite again. And when we think of community, we think of coming into unity. And so if you reflect back in that time, there were no mobile phones, there was no Facebook, there was actually, it wasn't even permitted that people could gather together and talk about things. That had to happen in secret. So what was it that actually happened? What was the miracle? What was the alchemy that happened for all of those people to come together in one moment and say, we want change. We want something else to happen. And against a regime that was restrictive and violent and punitive, all of a sudden the wall burst. The wall broke down, and if you look at even now YouTube videos of that, you see the joy on people's faces, families that had been separated being reunited again, and a country that could become whole. And then later on we see how important community becomes with Arab Spring in the early 2000s, and so many countries that shifted and changed as a result of the people that said that that's what they wanted. And in more recent times we see organizations online like Avaz or Change.org that are able, through the gathering of people's will and intention, to really create changes, to create changes in policies, sometimes even a change in government, just by virtue of the power of the people coming together. And in these days, in the chaos in which we live, which we'll get to in a minute, but in these days, we're no longer restricted by the lens of television and programming and what some authority might wish us to view. We're free to access information and data and statistics and heartfelt messages that can be delivered via the internet. And it's given us such possibility to access new thought. And it's given us the possibility for things like this event to happen, where new thought leaders can come together. They can come together and express and influence. So with all of this genius that's here in the summit, genius musicians who have spent thousands of hours practicing and rehearsing so they can deliver their message, the geniuses of Greg Braden and Marianne Williamson and all of the other wonderful people that are sharing this platform for this event right now. How do we transform that into reality? How do we realize it? How do we actually make it real? For all the workshops and decades of study that I've made, the treasures that I've found, they're not really worth anything unless I can translate them into a seed that can be placed in your heart, that you can carry until it's ready to sprout and bear its own seeds. And isn't it by noticing these things that we're able to create difference, to create shift and change? If we were to write a musical score for what's going on this year, in 2020, the year that so many people aspired to being the year of perfect vision, right? And then we look at the chaos and the cacophony that's actually here in this moment. The separation, the anxiety, the polarization, the anger, the fear, the suffering and the pain. If we were to write a musical score of this moment in this year, it would probably look something like this. And if you were to listen to all of those instruments playing at the same time, it would probably sound something like this. It reminds me of when my youngest child, Alfie, was in his teens, and I read a Facebook post of his, and he always had a terribly messy room, and his mom and I would always be urging him to clean it up. And then he put this cheeky post up that said, "Out of chaos, creativity can be born." So what if the chaos that we're in, this mess of humanity that we're in, is exactly what we need for something to be born? And what is it that might want to be born in this? What if we can create new music, just like these wonderful musicians that are with us? What if together we can create new music to change what's actually happening here? And what would it look like to use community for that? Well, I'm here to suggest, and from my own experience, that it's an inside job. We're so stimulated and barraged by external things that happen, and we're so used to blaming the outside world for what's wrong with our lives that we've actually acquitted ourselves from a choice, a sense of choice. We've abdicated from our creative right as human beings to be agents of change. So what would it look like to take the reins back? What would it look like to take the wheel back? What would it look like to be the author of our own lives, the conductor of our own lives, instead of being in the audience as our life passes us by? My own experience with all the pains and sufferings that I've had has been to learn that only by looking inside and seeking those broken parts of who I am can I begin to achieve some kind of integrity, some kind of wholeness again, by going back to the parts of me that were frozen or wounded, or my inner child that was abused, and by gaining the trust of those parts of me so I can become the conductor of my own inner orchestra. So we use the analogy of the musical score of our chaos that we live in today earlier on. Let me ask you to imagine something now. Imagine you've just walked into Madison Square Gardens or the Albert Hall in London, and you're going to watch a concert, a classical concert of Mozart or Strauss. And you get in early, they let you in early, and you get to see the orchestra as each player unzips his instrument and starts to make sure it's in tune so they can play together. And you hear that violin going, ee, and you hear the bassoon going, brr, 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 brr. And the guitar is plucking away at his notes, and the drum is boom, 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 and the piano's hitting middle C, and it's chaos, right? I mean, it's a total mess. But you know that the moment the conductor comes in, and the whole audience drops into silence and presence and expectancy, that pregnant moment, and he raises his baton, and then boom, everything is beautiful. It's so beautiful that it could move you to tears. It's so beautiful that it caresses your soul. And you're in a room with all these other people, and you feel that your skin go into goosebumps because you know the whole room is feeling the same thing. How beautiful is that moment in life? But it all started with that chaotic tuning of individual bits that really weren't talking to each other at all. They were just doing their thing, right? Guitarist getting his thing right, and the drummer getting his skin tight, and everybody doing what they needed to do to be ready. Well, what would it look like to look inside ourselves and those broken parts of who we are as our own inner orchestra? So the part of me that was abused and frozen into fear when I was 6 years old, when I lost my breath because I was abused, when I lost my breath because I was beaten, when those moments happened, something stopped. Part of me stopped living. A snapshot of who I was still exists in my body, it still exists in my psyche, and sometimes it's reawakened by someone hurting my feelings or raising a hand, or I see something on television and it upsets me, and it upsets that part of me. But I think it's all of me that's upset. I get upset, but actually, what if it's just that part of me that's been reactivated, reawakened? And what if that part of me is angry and gets angry with my wife as a result of being hurt by what she might say, or angry at a politician or someone else or some world event, stirs me into activation? But of course, what happens when I get activated is my adrenaline surges and I kind of lose the plot. I kind of lose my range of choice and I say things in an attempt to win the greatest argument that I ever lost. And isn't that the chaos that we live in today? And so my process over these last decades has been the recollection, the retrieval of these broken parts of me that have never spoken to each other. They lie there dormant, hidden, buried, forgotten, until they get reawakened, and then they dominate me. They make me say things. I get in trouble. I say things I didn't want to say. I hurt people I didn't want to hurt. And so if I look at my inner orchestra and I imagine walking into my own inner auditorium, what can I do as the conductor? How can I create that moment that I can raise my baton and that moment of wonderful silence can happen? And then that inner unity can begin to play the song of who I really am. And so my question for you is such an important part in this year, in this door that's opening from chaos into opportunity. What about your inner orchestra? What about your dedication to your own human journey? Because like it or not, you're already a leader. You may not be aware of it, but people, your children, your friends, your peers, even perhaps your parents, look to you as an example. They learn from you, just like I get to learn from all my breathers. They all teach me something. And then if you're willing to consider that, if you're willing to consider that your own inner orchestra will end up playing one note to the world, then what's your instrument? What instrument are you? And what would it look like to join with other instruments and create a new wave of music to co-create that we could do together? There are three fundamental parts to what I want to speak to today. And they're really about the foundation of who you are, the quality of presence, and the example that we set in the world. And when we come together in community in the outer world, if we can be committed enough to our inner healing and our inner community, then perhaps we can create a new form of intelligence. Perhaps we can recreate a new musical score of beauty and harmony. So those three things are fundamental: the foundation, the presence, and the example that we set for other people. And how I am bringing this out to the world with my Alchemy of Breath community and all the people that I've breathed is now being born into something new. It's being born into something called Asha, the Alchemy School of Healing Arts. And Asha in Sanskrit means hope. And Asha is hope for humanity. That by virtue of our foundation, in order to support righteous and virtuous cycles of business and enterprise and rebirth and regeneration of an old town here in Tuscany. And our online program, which is our online platform, which is designed to provide a voice for all those leaders, those wise people in the world who they're not on television, they're not in documentaries, they're not in films, but they have a voice that counts. To all those elders that are in the world that have wisdom that they're going to die with unless we listen. Our online platform is designed to bring these new thought leaders to the world. And Asha on Land is a model community. It's a community we've designed so it can be replicated, so it can be done in any culture or any country in the world. And if we're dedicated to our inner world and we're committed to noticing what's different in order to be an agent of change, this coming together, this creating a model for humanity on land, can revive forgotten parts of our lifetime. Here on our land, here we're reviving olives that have been ignored for over a century. People knew how to live. And what would it look like to recombine this with the new world of digital culture? That we can actually choose where we want to live now, and people are coming here to Tuscany from all parts of the world who have a virtual platform to express themselves to the world. And we can create healthy, virtuous circles, recyclable industries that help bring the children and the grandchildren back to the grandparents that are in these old towns, sitting on their own with no one to give their message to. So what would your part in this be? How could your instrument meet another instrument? How could your foundation, your example, and your presence be latched on to other people's? What would it look like to come into community? What would it look like to learn about how you may be able to start your own community where you live? And I know this touches a lot of hearts because thousands of people tell us so. This is what we've been waiting for. And this is an idea whose time has come. So if you feel that this is something that might be of interest to you, if you wish to enter into more brotherhood and sisterhood and into a collective wisdom that you can co-create, let us know. You'd be very welcome. And may this seed grow in your heart, and may it grow into a tree, and may you plant many, many seeds in your own life. Blessings and thank you.